Welcome to the Republican Professor. I'm your host, Lucas J. Mather. Good to be with you. We're in this Chevron Deference Doctrine deep dive, which we started last year, over 6 months ago, December 2024. And the last episode that we did was May 27th, 2025. It's now 15 July 2025, years after Jesus. And excuse me. Um, we're going to finish Kagan's Dissent in Loper Bright today. Lord willing, we're at least going to do Roman numeral III. Let's go ahead and share my screen. Feel free to call me Sharon. We're at Google Scholar. Go to case law, go to federal courts, and go to Loper Bright. It's right there at the top. We're going to scroll down a bit. Now, you know what? The pagination I'm using, hold up. Let me stop my screen and I'm going to pause. I'm back in black. Actually, I have a light gray jacket on today with a dark blue shirt and a striped silver and blue tie. I went to the Supreme Court's website, the U.S. Supreme Court, and I'm just pulling it up there because the pagination I have printed out reflects that pagination. And I think we should be on the same pagination, if you know what I mean. You know what I mean, Vern? All right. We're on 24 of Kagan's Dissent. So I got to scroll down. The concurrences are before the dissents. There we go. You see the pagination there? I suppose you can see it if you're not blind. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever else, you may not see the pagination, but trust me, we're on page 24 of the U.S. Supreme Court.gov opinions. You go to supremecourt.gov and, I'll link it. I'll link it. That way you can just clicky little wiki. If you can't see the link on whatever platform you're using for audio only, you can go to the website and you can click the link there because the website has the link. The website and the YouTube will have the same links. And I'm giving you this information because some people might say, aren't you worried about getting low views or low listens? No, I'm not really worried about that. I don't take any responsibility for that. Um, I'm providing a quality service here. If you can't tell that's what it is, it's probably because you have such a low attention span that you have whittled down to a mere stub of a human being. And that's not my issue. That's your issue. I'm here to help you uh, recover and become sober if that's what you want to do. But I'm not here to entertain you. I mean, you might be entertained by my stupid tie and my stupid jacket and my stupid jokes. Maybe I'm being myself. I'm being silly. But teachers take far too much responsibility for the bad habits of students. And instead, students should be shamed back into oblivion until they get better. Too much is writing on this. This is not stuff that you can just render into an entertainment. We have to shape hearts and minds here, of the American voter. That's not my responsibility to do all that. It's a two-way street there. And all these gizmos and gadgets to get views and listens, they may work to get views and listens, but do they really shape hearts and minds? Or are they just perpetuating a low attention span and wanting to go to the next thing, the next shiny little thing, the next shiny little whiny thing. You tell me. I'm going to continue here. Okay. Loper Bright, Kagan's Dissent, overturning Chevron deference doctrine last year, 2024, a little bit over a year ago. This was published. Kagan is a Democrat, remember, page 24, Roman numeral III. And still there is worse. Okay, now let me scroll back just a sec. Remember, the last thing she said was the majority's opinion is grounded on air. She said this on page 23, that the whole argument for overturning Chevron relies on Section 706. She says, but the text of Section 706, that's the Administrative Procedure Act that goes back, she's 70 some years, almost 80 years. The text of Section 706 does not support that result. So she's saying, if you're textualists, you textualists are doing it wrong. And still, there is worse, because abandoning Chevron deference subverts every known principle of stare decisis. So now she's saying not only does overturning Chevron not work for textual reasons, but also canons of interpretation like stare decisis, canons of jurisprudence, I should say. Stare decisis is a principle that you just let the precedent rest. Let it rest. Okay? Of course, respecting precedent is not an inexorable command, but overthrowing it requires more, far more, than the majority has offered up here. So it says Kagan. Chevron is entitled to stare decisis' strongest form of protection. The majority thus needs an exceptionally strong reason to overturn the decision above and beyond thinking it wrong. And it has nothing approaching such a justification, proposing only a bewildering theory about Chevron's unworkability. Just 5 years ago, this court in Kaiser rejected a plea to overturn Auer versus Robbins, which requires judicial deference to agencies' interpretations of their own regulations. Yeah, I remember that case. Our deference is a different type of issue. It's related to Chevron, and it's called our deference after the plaintiff here, Auer, in 1997 case. So did you catch that? Our deference requires judicial deference to agencies' interpretations of their own regulations. Oh, it gets fun, people. It gets fun. You thought you weren't going to have any fun today? Oh, you're going to have a lot of fun. The case against overturning Chevron is at least as strong. In particular, the majority's decision today will cause a massive shock to the legal system, casting doubt on many settled constructions of statutes and threatening the interests of many parties who have relied on them for years. Adherence to precedent is a foundation stone of the rule of law. Stare decisis promotes the even-handed, predictable, and consistent development of legal principles. It enables people to order their lives in reliance on judicial decisions. And it contributes to it contributes to the actual and perceived integrity of the judicial process by ensuring that those decisions are founded in the law and not in the personal preferences of judges. All right, keep going. Page 25. Perhaps above all else, stare decisis is a doctrine of judicial modesty. In that, it shares something important with Chevron. Both tell judges that they do not know everything and would do well to attend to the views of others. So today, the majority rejects what judicial humility counsels, not just once, but twice over. And Chevron is entitled to a particularly strong form of stare decisis for two separate reasons. First, it matters that Congress remains free to alter what we have done in a constitutional case. The court alone can correct an error. That sounds very strange to me. Red flag number 1 right here. This is strange. All right. This is where you're going to get my comments on this decision. This is why you tune in. You don't tune in for any kind of fancy schmancy entertainment. You tune in because you can make fun of my tie at the very same time you can hear me bloviate about what the Democrats have gone wrong, and also the Republicans, because Republicans do wrong stuff too. You know, we're here to help educate voters, and I'm happy to do that. Now check this out. It remains free. It matters that Congress remains free to alter what we have done. Yeah. Well, let's think about this. Then Congress can do whatever it wants, regardless of what the Supreme Court says. As far as this goes, they can pass a bill, at least as far as they go. And if they get enough agreement, they can override a presidential veto. That's pretty powerful. There's nothing the Supreme Court can do about that. So why would that count against the majority opinion here? After all, Congress can override and undo what the majority says. Congress can just change the law and say, no, Chevron deference is the law. Sorry, you got it wrong, Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court has to interpret that. And how do you misinterpret that? The whole point of what the Supreme Court, the Republicans on the Supreme Court are doing in overturning Chevron deference is they are saying that Congress can fix this. That's the whole thing that they're saying. It's not agencies that fix things that are problems of the law. Congress has to fix things. So it's like she wasn't even listening. And then she says, in a constitutional case, the court alone can correct an error. I mean, I would rephrase that, because the key word in here that she has any kind of credibility on is this word case, because that's the constitutional word in Article 3. But there are lots of cases that don't go to the court. And in fact, you could say that every election is a case of some kind that's maybe too complicated for the court. It's too many issues. So maybe she means in a discrete case between parties, but it's still not true that the court alone can correct an error. That's just false. The court could get it wrong, And the president might be able to correct something by issuing a pardon. Are you saying the court can't get it wrong? And that the president has no power to correct a problem by issuing a pardon? That's the whole point of having a pardon. And the part is the whole acknowledgement that the court could possibly get it wrong. The Congress can also correct an error. The states can correct an error. There are processes for amending the Constitution that can correct an error. I mean, didn't we, when I say we, the United States, didn't we ban alcohol? We had prohibition. Did the court correct that error? No. No. There are lots of cases involving alcohol that were perhaps correctable, maybe by the court, but they're not the only ones that can correct it, is my point. So she needs to get rid of this word alone. That word alone does not belong there. The court alone is not the one that corrects errors on our system. That's way too much pressure on the court. It's very odd that you're saying that right after you said something about judicial modesty. Judicial modesty. You're talking about modesty, and then now all of a sudden the court has been promoted to the one institution that can correct errors of the this is incongruent. Okay, you need to think a little bit more carefully about this. But there's only one T, so don't get too excited. That is not so here. Our deference decisions are balls tossed into Congress's court for acceptance or not as that branch elects. And for generations now, Congress has chosen acceptance. Well, couldn't they just choose acceptance of this opinion? See, I mean, that's what I'm saying is she to me, this sounds kind of desperate to me. Her words are tough, but there's no substance behind them. Throughout those years, Congress could have abolished Chevron across the board, most easily by amending the APA, or it could have eliminated deferential review in discrete areas by amending old laws or drafting new laws to include an anti-Chevron provision. Instead, Congress has spurned multiple opportunities to do a comprehensive rejection of Chevron and has hardly ever done a targeted one. Or, to put the point more affirmatively, yeah, let's hear that. Congress has kept Chevron as is for 40 years. It maintained that position even as members of this court began to call Chevron into question. From all it appears, Congress has not agreed with the view of some justices that they and other judges should have more power. You just gave judges quite a bit of power over up there. Well, actually, didn't really give them that power because they don't have it. But when you say the court alone can correct an error in a constitutional case, that's enormous power. What are you talking about? You're worried about judges having power. Are you kidding me? Give me a break. Give me a break. Now I know what it takes. Showing the whole world nothing can get me down. Ooh, doo, doo, doo. Give me a break. Okay, I don't remember the last part of that song. Second, Chevron is by now much more than a single decision. It's a married decision. This court alone, acting as Chevron allows, has upheld an agency's reasonable interpretation of a statute at least 70 times. And I think the court would say That's 70 mistakes. And that doesn't follow that you should have 71 mistakes. Page 26. Lower courts have applied the Chevron framework on thousands upon thousands of occasions. Wow. Okay. The Kaiser Court observed when upholding our that deference to a reasonable agency interpretations of ambiguous rules pervades the whole corpus of administrative law. So too does deference to reasonable agency interpretations of ambiguous statutes, except more so. Chevron is as embedded gets in the law. All right. I think I need to have a comment here. Okay. So she's saying it basically defines the whole corpus of administrative law. The word she uses pervades. Okay. All right. That means another way of saying this would be that if there's a problem there, it pervades the entire system of administrative law. If Chevron is screwed up, admin law entirely is screwed up. So, what do you do about it? Um, she's saying Congress can fix it, but Congress didn't fix it. The Republicans on the majority would say the same thing. Yeah, I know. So we are going to make this decision because it's wrong. It's wrong judicially. Congress should be fixing these problems, not agencies. And we're not going to screw up admin law even more by allowing this to continue because this is in our wheelhouse. We're going to fix admin law right now. If Congress wants to get in the game and start doing its job, it's free to. But it's not been doing its job for 40 years. So, yeah, there you go. We're just telling Congress, start doing your job. We're not going to cover for your mistakes anymore. That's what's happening here. It's a separation of powers issue. And the Democrats don't like that. They don't like that at all. They want to perpetuate this mistake because they feel like they benefit from the mistake. The mistakes in administrative law, they benefit from. Republicans are saying, we don't really benefit from this. Nobody benefits from this. This is a mistake. And we're not going to let it continue. We don't have to, and we're not going to. Congress still can override what we were saying here. Feel free, get back in the game, but they're not in the game. That's the problem. And we're not going to take the blame for it anymore. So too does deference to a reasonable. Okay, so all right, the majority says differently because this court has ignored Chevron lately since 2016. All that is left of the decision is a decaying husk with bold pretensions. Tell that to the DC Circuit, the court that reviews a large share of agency interpretations where Chevron remains alive and well. But more to the point, I have a good quote. Sometimes I make myself laugh. Right here, she says, "Tell that to the DC Circuit." And my comment I'll show you. My comment is, I think they just did. See, that's what I mean is there's so many puzzling little one-liners in here from Kagan. It's almost like an undergrad in a way. It's kind of embarrassing to me. She used to be like a dean or something at Harvard, I know that Harvard's a bunch of grade inflators, and I'm not saying she was grade inflated. I'm just saying maybe she has brain fog or something. I don't know. But she said, tell that to the DC Circuit. Well, I think they just did. I think this opinion tells the DC Circuit. Am I wrong about that? I mean, this is kind of basic federal court jurisdictional stuff. You know. Uh, all right, let's keep going. Uh, but more to the point, the majority's argument is a bootstrap. This court has avoided deferring under Chevron since 2016. Okay. So it's been stare decisis until 2016, which was 8 years prior. She could have said that, but she didn't. That kind of self-help on the way to reversing precedent has become almost routine at this court. Stop applying a decision where one should, throw some gratuitous criticisms into a couple of opinions, issue a few separate writings questioning the decision's premises, give the whole process a few years, and voila, you have a justification for overruling the decision. All right. Well, let's keep going. Page 27 at the top. I once remarked that this overruling through enfeeblement technique mocked stare decisis. I have seen no reason to change my mind. The majority does no better in its justification for overruling Chevron, that the decision is unworkable. The majority's first theory on that score is that there is no single answer about what ambiguity means. Some judges turn out to see more of it than others do, leading to different results. But even if so, the legal system has for many years and many contexts dealt perfectly well with that variation. Take contract law. It is hornbook stuff that but only when, a contract is ambiguous, a court interpreting it can consult extrinsic evidence. And when all interpretive tools still leave ambiguity, the contract is construed against the drafter. Okay. So I guess the contract rules of the 50 states are unworkable now. Or look closer to home, to doctrines this court regularly applies. In deciding whether a government has waived sovereign immunity, we construe any ambiguities in the statutory language in favor of immunity. Similarly, scrolling down a little bit more, the rule of lenity tells us to construe ambiguous statutes in favor of criminal defendants. And the canon of constitutional avoidance instructs us to construe ambiguous laws to avoid difficult constitutional questions. I could go on, but the point is made. There are ambiguity triggers all over the law. Somehow, everyone seems to get by. Okay. Page 28. And Chevron is an especially puzzling decision to criticize on the ground of generating too much judicial divergence. There's good empirical, meaning non-impressionistic evidence on exactly that subject, and it shows that as compared with de novo review, use of the Chevron two-step framework fosters agreement among judges. more importantly, Chevron has a powerful constraining effect on partisanship in judicial decision making. All right. Well, let's see here. I think it might be worthwhile to do that quote. A predictable effect of overruling Chevron. This is a quotation. I think it's Sunstein, Cass Sunstein, his book. Not book. It would be a law review article that she's citing on page 1672. A predictable effect of overruling Chevron would be to ensure a far greater role for judicial polity preferences in statutory interpretation and far more common splits among ideological lines. So if consistency among judges is the majority's lodestar, then the court should not overrule Chevron, but return to using it. Well, I think this is worth commenting on here because so far as it goes, this was my worry about the Republican decision in overturning Chevron. My worry was that the back and forth that you see on policy making of ambiguous statutes between administration to administration, R versus D, that was the Chevron feature, will just now be kicked to the courts. Same thing, except the courts will do the same thing, except that you can't undo it in an election. You have to undo it in a costly and lengthy impeachment process to remove the judges, and even then, it's really costly and lengthy. What she's saying here is she's saying if you want to avoid that, you have to keep Chevron, and the Republicans are wrong. Now, ironically, it'd be nice if she mentioned something about this here. I think it would strengthen her point. But the point is not as powerful as it could be because she's missing something here. She's saying that if you want to avoid splits among ideological lines, keep Chevron. Well, my comment here in my printout, my comment here, which I made that comment. When did I make that comment? I made that 15 March 2025 at 7:40 p.m. So several months ago. My comment is, why the split in the court here then? If we're all about avoiding ideological splits, then why are you and the Democrats splitting here? So that it's Republicans versus Democrats on this issue. There's something that's not being explained there. And so this comes off as not as powerful a point as I think she thinks it is or hopes that it would be. Why is it that only Democrats are splitting from the majority here? Or to put it another way, why is it that only Republicans are splitting from the Democrats? I mean, either way you put it, it's a purely Republican versus Democrat split on this. And so if you're saying that you want your side will preserve, will guard against those splits on the lower court, um, and that's a basic value of yours, tell me more about that. Why the split here then? What's going on here ideologically, to use her word? I don't like that word. I don't use it. Philosophically is what I would say. What's the split? Why is there a split? I mean, does she think that the Republicans think that there's going to be more Republican judges? And so, I mean, say what you're saying. I mean, if that's what you're saying, tell me, explain that to me. I'm just curious about it. I think you need to say it. The majority's second theory on workability is likewise a make weight. Chevron, the majority complains, has some exceptions which, so the majority says, are difficult and complicated to apply. Recall that courts are not supposed to defer when the agency construing a statute, one, has not been charged with administering the law, and two, has not used deliberated procedures, i.e., notice and comment, rulemaking, or adjudication, or three, is intervening in a major question of great economic and political significance. As I've explained, so those are the exceptions to applying Chevron deference right here. She gave three exceptions. You want to take note of these three exceptions to Chevron deference application. She says, we have exceptions. They seem to work fine. That's what she's saying. These exceptions would cover the complaints that the majority has with Chevron. That's what she's saying. Page 28 at the bottom. As I've explained, those exceptions, the majority aptly calls them refinements, fit with Chevron's rationale. They define circumstances in which Congress is unlikely to have wanted agency views to govern. And on the difficulty scale, they are nothing much. Has Congress put the agency in charge of administering the statute? In 99 of 100 cases, everyone will agree on the answer with scarcely a moment's thought. Did the agency use notice and comment or an adjudication? My question here on the adjudication issue is, here's my comment on my copy here. Yeah. Here's my comment. Can you see that? My comment is, why is the executive branch doing this? Why are you okay with the executive branch doing adjudication? Take a closer look at that word adjudication. You see how it's spelled? A-D. And then there's this J-U-D-I-C. Oh, what's the root word? Judicial. Why is the executive branch doing a judicial function? You want to explain that to me like I'm a really smart 8-year-old with a huge attention span? Go ahead. I'm listening. I'm listening. Sounds like a separation of powers issue to me. I'm saying that as a Republican. Did the agency use notice and comment? Right. Okay. Yeah. Or an adjudication before rendering an interpretation? Once again, page 29 at the top. I could stretch my mind and think up a few edge cases, but for the most part, the answer is an easy yes or no. The major questions exception is, I acknowledge, different. There, many judges have indeed disputed its nature and scope, but That disagreement concerns, on everyone's view, a tiny subset of all agency interpretations. For the most part, the exceptions that so it's upset the majority require merely a rote check the box inquiry. If that is the majority's idea of a dizzying breakdance, the majority needs to get out more. All right. Okay. And anyway, difficult as compared to what? The majority's prescribed way of proceeding is no walk in the park. First, the majority makes clear that what is usually called Skidmore deference continues to apply. Under that decision, that's a 1944 Supreme Court decision. Under that decision, agency interpretations constitute a body of experience and informed judgment that may be entitled to respect. If the majority thinks that the same judges who argue today are about where ambiguity resides, are not, let me try that sentence again. If the majority thinks that the same judges who argue today about where ambiguity resides are not going to argue tomorrow about what respect requires, I fear it will be gravely disappointed. That's not a bad point. That's not a bad point at all. I like that point. I agree with that. Yeah, that's not a bad point at all. Um, I have nothing bad to say about that point. Second, the majority directs courts to comply with the varied ways in which Congress, in fact, delegates discretionary authority to agencies. For example, Congress may authorize an agency to define or delimit statutory terms or concepts, or to fill up the details of a statutory scheme. Yeah, I think we're getting into some separation of powers issues on delegation. Looks like it. Can't avoid it. Or Congress may use, in describing an agency's regulatory authority, inherently flexible language like appropriate or reasonable. Fair point. She's pushing the separation of powers issue about delegation. Attending to every such delegation, as the majority says, is necessary in a world without Chevron. But that task involves complexities of its own. Indeed, one reason Justice Scalia supported Chevron was that it replaced such a statute by statute evaluation, which was assuredly a font of uncertainty and litigation, with an across the board presumption. That was a 1989 Admin Law Journal, Duke Law Journal. As a lover of the predictability that rules create, Justice Scalia thought the latter unquestionably better. Yeah, but that was 1989, and Justice Scalia began to change his mind. And so you want to talk about that, Justice Kagan. Why are you leaving that out, Justice Kagan? On the other side of the balance, the most important stare decisis factor, call it the jolt to the legal system issue, weighs heavily against overruling Chevron. Congress and agencies alike have relied on Chevron, have assumed its existence in much of their work for the last 40 years. All right. I got to take a quick drink of water. All right. I just had to get a cup of coffee and, attend to some hydration issues. I want to acknowledge your hard work on this. if you are working hard. It's it's not easy. This stuff is not easy. Part of the reason I do this is to show you that it's not easy, but you can make progress. And that's what we're doing here on the Republican Professor podcast. It's very important. Progress can be made. It does require some elbow grease. You don't have to be Einstein to read this. Uh, in fact, I prefer that we don't have a bunch of Einsteins running around trying to run the country. I think average everyday people need to know what's going on. They need to level up a bit. And part of it is the humbling experience of seeing how much material there is and how much it engages your mind and how much energy it takes to get through just one thing. There's a reason I do that. It's because we need more humility in what we ask the government to do. I just realized I have my fan on too high. One moment. We have this weird idea that we elect somebody and then they just become Superman. No, they're human beings just like you. And if you're having a hard time focusing on this, guess what? They are too. They are too. Now, there are people that have a lot of energy, and people that have a lot of energy, they might have it from like some kind of genetic disposition, but sometimes they have it not for good reasons. They've got coping mechanisms that help them get through, and they're unhealthy people. And that's not who we need in Congress. I'm thinking of like Michael Tate, for example. I know he's not a government official, but he was a lead singer of Newsboys, a band I've followed for a long time. And if you look at him, he's no spring chicken up there. It requires a lot of energy to do what he does. And apparently, he had some kind of motivational structure in his moral psychology where he was relying on cocaine. He was relying on inappropriate sexual contact to give him the motivation to do what he's doing. And it's that's human nature. Anytime you put people in a situation where they have a task that's beyond what they're really capable of doing in a healthy way, you're going to get people that fudge the lines and they're screwing up some other way. Now they're in it for the money. They're in it for some other reason. And you need to understand the government cannot do everything that people promise it will do in an election. And if you're not smart enough to see that, and if the American people are not smart enough to see that, they're going to keep expecting too much from the government. And the government will try to over deliver and they're going to screw it up because they don't think anybody's watching. And the next thing you know, there's weird programs in Uganda being funded that target young children for recruiting them to be Qs in the LGBTQ, the alphabet people, the long, what's the LG, the long range guided ballistic transcontinental, intercontinental anti-submarine warfare, the alphabet people. So if you're having a hard time with this, guys, I'm hoping you're seeing that. It it's hard stuff, and we shouldn't expect the government to do everything. They're gonna screw it up, dude. They're gonna screw it up. Why? How do I know that? Well, because if the only people that are paying attention are the people that can follow this stuff, and you're not, how are you going to keep everybody accountable? How are you going to do that? Based on memes you see on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. I mean, seriously, you don't have a lot of energy. I don't have a lot of energy. Let's keep going. My point is there's a lot more here than just learning some law. We're also being shaped into what is realistic for people to be expected to do. You might say, well, people that spend their life in the law could be expected to do a lot more. Well, but how are you going to keep them accountable if you're not leveled up? How are you going to be a fair and accurate judge of electing people to keep them accountable if you're not leveled up? You see my point? It's a lot. Let's continue. Let me know what you think in the comments. You can also comment on the Facebook posts. I sometimes post links and photos of episodes there. You can follow me on Instagram as well, at the Republican Professor. At the Republican Professor on Instagram. I'm also on Twitter at Republican Prof. I think that's all the characters that they were that Twitter gave me. So feel free to follow the Republican Professor on Facebook if you want, or whatever. Subscribe on YouTube, and YouTube allows you to make comments. I'd be happy to hear from you. There's also a Substack, and you can make comments on Substack. All right. So here we go. On the other side of the balance, the most important stare decisis factor, called the jolt to the legal system issue, weighs heavily against overruling Chevron. Congress and agencies alike have relied on Chevron, have assumed its existence in much of their work for the last 40 years. Statutes passed during that time reflect the expectation that Chevron would allocate interpretive authority between agencies and courts. Rules issued during the period likewise presuppose that statutory ambiguities were the agencies to reasonably resolve. Those agency interpretations may have benefited regulated entities, or they may have protected members of the broader public. Either way, private parties have ordered their affairs, their business and financial decisions, their healthcare decisions, their educational decisions around agency actions that are suddenly now subject to change. But aren't they subject to change every election under Chevron? Right? Am I right? Or am I right or am I right? Am I right or am I right or am I right? Sorry, subject to challenge. In Kaiser, this court refused to overrule Auer because doing so would cast doubt on many longstanding constructions of rules and thereby upset settled expectations. Overruling Chevron and thus raising new doubts about agency constructions of statutes will be far more disruptive. The majority tries to alleviate concerns about a piece of that problem. It states that judicial decisions that have upheld agency action as reasonable. I'm switching this light over here so that you can see this side of my tie and check out any nose hairs that I missed on this side of my nose. I know that's really the reason why you're watching this. And, in Kaiser, this court refused to overrule Auer because doing so would cast doubt on many longstanding constructions of rules and thereby upset settled expectations. Overruling Chevron and thus raising new doubts about agency constructions of statutes will be far more disruptive. The majority tries to alleviate concerns about a piece of that problem. It states that judicial decisions that have upheld agency action as reasonable under Chevron should not be overruled on that account alone. That is all to the good. There are thousands of such decisions, many settled for decades. But first, we're on page 31. Reasonable reliance need not be predicated on prior judicial decision. Some agency interpretations never challenged under Chevron will be. Expectations formed around those constructions thus could be upset in a way the majority's assurance does not touch. And anyway, how good is that assurance really? The majority says that a decision's mere reliance on Chevron is not enough to counter the force of stare decisis. A challenger will need an additional special justification. The majority is sanguine. I'm not so much. Courts motivated to overrule an old Chevron-based decision. Sorry, I didn't scroll down here. I'm on page 31 now. Courts motivated to overrule an old Chevron-based decision can always come up with something to label a special justification. Maybe a court will say the quality of the precedent's reasoning was poor. Or maybe the court will discover something unworkable in the decision, like some exception that has to be applied. All a court need do is look to today's opinion to see how it is done. Number 4, Roman numeral 4. Should we plow through? We've been going for a while. This is ordinarily where it would be good to stop, but I don't want a really short episode next time, and look how short number 4 is, so we're just going to plow through number 4. Judges are not experts in the field and are not part of either political branch of the government. Well, why are you split among Republican versus Democrat here then, if that's true? I'd love to hear your answer to that, Judge Kagan. Justice Kagan. You say Justice K is Justice Kagan. Oh, okay, fine, whatever. The constitutional word is judge, by the way. That's in the Constitution. The word justice is not in the Constitution as a noun or a title. Okay. So what about that? Those were the days when we knew what we are not. When we knew that as between courts and agencies, Congress would usually think agencies the better choice to resolve the ambiguities and fill the gaps in regulatory statutes. Yeah, but again, let me just mention here, why are there so many ambiguities and gaps in regulatory statutes? If you think someone else is going to fix that problem, then what's the incentive for reducing the size of that problem? None. None. If you're punting lawmaking to the branch that's not supposed to do lawmaking, the branch that is supposed to do lawmaking isn't going to take itself seriously as a lawmaking branch. That's the whole point of what the Republicans are saying here. Justice Kagan. Because agencies are experts in the field, but these are political issues. They're not merely expertise driven. And even when there are experts involved, they often disagree. You think I'm wrong? Let me pull up a book. Alvin Goldman, Social Epistemology. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Let me see if the table of contents is in here. It's been a while since I've read this book, but I have read it. Social Epistemology. Now it's called Socialist Epistemology. Just kidding. Okay, so yeah, the Amazon is not going to give me the let me see if I can read a sample here. All right, well, they're giving me all I want is the table of contents. That's all I want. Because it's been a while since I've read this. 2011. Okay, I read an earlier edition. This might not be the same one. Well, we have issues about disagreements here. And this is a major issue, is what I'm trying to say, is there's an issue about disagreement. Let me look this up really quick because this is something that just came to my mind. Okay. Now, when I was doing my master's, I finished my master's in philosophy. I was interested in social epistemology for a while, specifically the novice to expert problem. And I don't like using AI. I'm not going to do a Google search on that and have you look at the AI results because the AI was defective in returning the results that I was talking about. And there was a green book, I remember it in the library, called Social Epistemology by Alvin Goldman. And I remember reading through some of this. Now, I was just sharing my screen, and I'm going to go back to sharing it. Okay. Um, I looked up social epistemology, and there's a new book, a newer book on Amazon. And there's also one, the same book is on the Oxford University Press website. So I'm gonna bypass Amazon because I don't like giving Amazon too much airtime. I know that we all use it. I want you to support your local book dealers. I think you should support your publishers. This is Oxford University Press. And academic presses, I think they need to be encouraged to continue to create these kind of books. Here's what they have on their publicly accessible website, and this is Oxford University Press's website, oup.com. Okay. Social Epistemology, Essential Readings, Alvin Goldman and Dennis Whitcomb. Um, I want to go to the table of contents, and I just want to show you some of the issues that are discussed. Roman numeral II is trust in testimony and experts. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. Take a look at chapter 6. I'm just going to look at the title. Obviously, I, I, you can't get the text unless you pay for the book, right? So, unless it's publicly available for some reason, and I don't know why they would do that because they want to sell the book, right? So, but they have shared publicly the table of contents. So here's the table of contents. Chapter 6, Alvin Goldman, experts, which ones should you trust? Now, this is not peer disagreement. The peer disagreement is a different issue in social epistemology. The issue of experts, which ones should you trust, is the one that's the issue I'm talking about. Oh, there's Richard Feldman. I had beers with Richard Feldman in Rochester. He was a professor at the University of Rochester for a while. I had beers. I think I was in his kitchen. I'm pretty sure. And who else was there? Timothy Williamson was there, and some other people. Um, all right. Well, now if you look up social epistemology on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which is publicly available, um, It's plato.stanford.edu. Cite your sources. Cite your sources. Okay. I don't want you guys, you gotta cite your sources. But Stanford Encyclopedia has made publicly available some entries about social epistemology. Okay. And it's kind of cool that you can go into the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy and get into some of these issues. Now, this entry was first published February 26, 2001, and there's the current table of contents, but I am interested in an older version of this because sometimes the older versions have stuff the newer versions don't have, and it's not always for good reason that they got rid of some of the older stuff. But in any case, you want to look at the older stuff because you can get an idea of the generation of the generations of discussion that have taken place in the field. So take a look at the different versions here. I'm going to go back to, I've already looked at 2001, and I don't think that was the 2001. I don't think was the, you didn't see how I got there. I went to author and citation info. This is plato.stanford.edu entries epistemology social. So I go there and I scroll down and you can see spring 2001. Alvin Goldman, he's the one that started it. But I think it was the fall 2006 that really captures the language of the novice to expert problem. And I think it's very interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and search on that. Let me go in here. All right. Our present question concerns two speakers, right? Let two speakers be putative experts in a given field, experts who nonetheless disagree with one another on a particular point. So I'm giving Stanford credit here for making this available, but I want you to think about that point. Is it possible for experts to disagree? Generally, expertise does not mean that you agree with everybody else. That's not what expertise means. In fact, expertise oftentimes means that you're in conversation with people who disagree with you and they're experts as well. Catch this, though, because this is related to Chevron deference. The Democrats think that experts are the ones that just fill in the blanks for statutes. Congress doesn't have to do it. Experts can do it. But that's political, though. That's political because experts can disagree. Go back to the social epistemology. Let the hearer be a self-acknowledged novice with no prior opinion on the matter. So that's you. You're the voter. You're the novice. How can such a novice decide justifiably this paragraph, this part of this paragraph right here is where I'm getting at. How can such a novice decide justifiably which of the two conflicting assertions merits greater trust? Goldman, 2001, calls this the novice to expert problem. That's the book I was reading. It's a recurring problem in practical life, but here we examine it in abstraction from principle instances. So this is called the novice to expert problem. Okay. Goldman, 2001. Let's take a look at that citation there. Here's Goldman, 1996. Here's 1991. We want 2001. Where is it? There it is. Alvin Goldman right there. It's called Experts, Which Ones to Trust, Philosophy and Phenomenological Research. That must have been published. That was published in a book that I definitely was reading. And I remember it was green. It was a hardcover. And it was called Social Epistemology. That was over 20 years ago, I'm sure. But yeah, this book right here, this article right here is the one I'm referring to. And I remember appreciating, so that's where it's that I guess it's republished in Oxford University Press. Okay, so here we are in Kagan's Dissent here. Loper Bright, we're on her page 31, SupremeCourt.gov opinions, okay? And agencies are experts in the field. Okay, great. But experts, you can't just say we need experts to make law for us. You can't say that, especially experts that are not elected. It's better to just have elected officials make the laws, and then you hold them accountable in elections. Okay. So this is related to a major issue in social epistemology. At its core, Chevron is about respecting that allocation of responsibility, the conferral of primary authority over regulatory matters to agencies, not courts. All right. Well, let me tell you who the author of this social epistemology entry was. Fall 2006. It might have been Alvin Goldman. Same guy. Let's see here. Doesn't say. That's strange. Maybe it was Alvin Goldman, but it seems like it should have the person's name on it, whoever wrote this. If you guys know who wrote this, let me know in the comments. Am I missing something here? I'm scrolling down to the bottom to see. There's the bibliography, but who wrote it? Come on, Stanford. You got to tell us. Please contact the author. Well, who's the author? Oh, okay, there it is. Copyright 2006 by Alvin Goldman. And it's even got an email address. I wonder if that email address is still good. You could email him. Alvin Goldman is the author. Okay, it's at the very end. Man, you had to really scroll down. I guess maybe it was kind of implied right here because here's the archives of the major links to the major corrections and stuff like that. Spring 2001, the first author was Alvin Goldman. Okay. And then I guess if they don't give you a new author, it's kind of implied that the fall 2006 was also Alvin Goldman. Looks like there's an author that's added in 2015. 2019, there's another author. And then 2023, there's another one. Alvin Goldman. Now, I'm not saying I agree with him about again, I don't agree with all these guys. Feldman, I'm actually a lot closer to agreeing with than Goldman. Although, Feldman was raising a different issue than Goldman is raising. I'm not sure how Feldman would deal with stuff, but he's an evidentialist and I'm an evidentialist. He's an internalist, I'm an internalist. He's a foundationalist, I'm a foundationalist. I don't know if Goldman's a foundationalist or not. It wouldn't surprise me if he was. I think he's an externalist though, and I'm not an externalist. Okay. Um, so if you don't know these words, don't worry about it. Just keep going. We'll get to a lot. If you don't know these words, actually, I would suggest you go to Trent Doherty's episode called "How Do We Know Things." I'll link it in the videos. He studied under Richard Feldman at Rochester and is an evidentialist, internalist, foundationalist. He checks all the right boxes. He knows a lot about Goldman, and he would be a very interesting guy to talk to. In fact, it would be really good to have him on the podcast to talk about the novice to expert problem. Maybe we'll do that. And there's other people that know a lot about it too that are in my circles. Not all of them have the guts to come onto the Republican Professor podcast, but um, anyway, so thank you. Let's thank the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy for making this material available for free. It's publicly available. You do have to cite it if you use it in paper. Make sure you cite this material. You got to cite the website entry. You got to cite the date. You got to cite the author. You got to make your citations tight. Put those in footnotes. Cite early and cite often, as I always say. And go to Oxford University Press and get this book for $115. um, or I'm sure you could get a used copy on eBay. There's also a paperback option. So I'm sure you can get a cheaper version, some used version, but support your local bookstore, um, and study philosophy. Study philosophy. There's a lot of good stuff out there. It's a very interesting field. There's, I think you need a good mentor. So don't study philosophy without a good mentor, is what I would say, at least initially. I think you should have good mentors and conversation partners all the way through. But anyway, I did. I know I did. Thank God. Well, okay, so we're back in Kagan. We're almost done. Let's just review. Let's just reread this paragraph. Um, Those were the days when we knew that what we are not, when we knew that as between courts and agencies, Congress would usually think agencies the better choice to resolve the ambiguities and fill the gaps in regulatory statutes, because agencies are experts in the field. See? Yeah, you see? Yeah, okay. What about the novice to expert problem? What about when experts disagree? And because they are a part of the political branch with a claim to making interstitial policy, because Congress has charged them, not us, with administering the statutes containing the open question. Yeah, but administering, does that mean lawmaking? Does that mean legislating? At its core, Chevron is about respecting that allocation of responsibility. The conferral okay, of primary authority over regulatory matters to agencies, not courts. Can Congress confer legislative power? That's the separation of powers issue. On page 32, today, the majority does not respect that judgment. It gives courts the power to make all manner of scientific and technical judgments. It gives courts the power to make all manner of policy calls, including about how to weigh competing goods and values. It puts courts at the apex of the administrative process as to every conceivable subject because there are always gaps and ambiguities in regulatory statutes, and often of great import. What actions can be taken to address climate change or other environmental challenges? What will the nation's healthcare system look like in the coming decades, or the financial and transportation systems? What rules are going to constrain the development of AI. In every sphere of current or future federal regulation, expect courts from now on to play a commanding role. It is not a role Congress has given to them, but Congress could take it back. It is not a role Congress had given to them in the APA or any other statute. It is a role this court has now claimed for itself, as well as for other judges. And that claim requires disrespecting to this court's precedent. There are no special reasons of the kind usually invoked for overturning precedent to eliminate Chevron deference. And given Chevron's pervasiveness, the decision to do so is likely to produce large-scale disruption. All that backs today's decision is the majority's belief that Chevron was wrong and it gave agencies too much power and courts not enough. But shifting views about the worth of regulatory actors and their work do not justify overhauling a cornerstone of administrative law. In that sense, too, um, today's majority has lost sight of its proper role. And it is impossible to pretend that today's decision is a one-off, either in its treatment of agencies or its a treatment of precedent. As to the first, this very term presents yet another example of the court's resolve to roll back agency authority despite congressional direction to the contrary. Um, Notice that she's talking about the Republicans here taking away President Trump's authority. I just wanted to point that out. Back then, it was Biden's authority. Well, whoever was pretending to be Biden. But now it reads very differently because Trump is in office. And it's Trump's judges that are doing this. Who wants dictatorial power again? Well, all right. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Let's see here. Um, as to the second, just my own defenses of stare decisis, my own dissents to this court's reversal of settled law by now fill a small volume. Once again, with respect, I dissent. I originally read and made comments on this on Saturday, 15 March 2025, 7:40 p.m. I was drinking Writer's Tears whiskey and I was having a Toasty Jones cigar. They're not paid sponsors. I thought I would just give them a shout out and thank them for doing good work. Well, you made it. You made it to the end, and we're at the very beginning now of the majority opinion, the Republicans overturning Chevron deference. We have some more work to do. We got to go through the opinion of the court, and we got to go through any concurrences that there may be from the Republicans. Thank you for joining me on the Republican Professor podcast. I've been your host, Dr. Lucas J. Mather. Today is 15 July 2025, years after the Big Bang. Oh, sorry, Buddha. No, you know what? After Jesus. Oh, yeah, that's it. Jesus. After Jesus. Wow, we get our dates from Jesus. 2025 years after Jesus. We'll see you next time.